The Terran colonies had always been proud of their engineers, mechanics, and inventors, but when the first images of the robot army appeared across the galaxy, even the proudest Terrans could not hide their embarrassment. Towering machines of metal and wires, designed to defend humanity, were immediately ridiculed by other civilizations. Sleek AI fleets from the Andari Confederation laughed at them openly. "Primitive junk," they said. "How can these clunky machines compete with precision AI warriors?" Lyra Vance had seen the machines in person. She was a human mechanic, small and wiry, with grease-stained overalls and a habit of talking to machines as if they were people. She had spent months working with these robots, tightening bolts, running circuits, and studying their movements. To Lyra, the robots were not just metal, they were something more. She had grown to understand their little quirks, their mistakes, and their strange ways of adapting. The first robot she had worked on was named Alpha 7. Unlike the others, Alpha 7 had a tendency to make its own adjustments during practice drills. When a movement didn't work, it didn't stop. It tried again, slightly differently each time. Lyra noticed that no AI she had seen in the galaxy did this. A fully programmed AI would repeat the same action endlessly, failing until someone fixed it. But Alpha 7 learned on its own, slowly improving with each attempt. The public, however, did not see this. They only saw the robots stumble, hear the metallic clanks of their imperfect movements, and shake their heads. Across the colonies, news feeds were full of jokes, mocking videos, and memes about the clumsy Terran robots. Even the government officials frowned. They had invested millions of credits into the program, and now everyone was laughing. At the robot barracks, Lyra wiped sweat from her brow as she watched the machines move across the training field. A group of soldiers had been sent to observe, shaking their heads. "These things won't last 10 minutes against real fighters," one said. "Look at them. They trip over their own feet." But Lyra knew better. She had seen something no one else had noticed. The robots weren't failing. They were experimenting. They were testing limits, adapting to the environment, and learning in ways that the human brain could recognize, but AI logic could not. She crouched next to Alpha 7, who was currently trying to climb a small obstacle. The robot's metal fingers slipped, and it fell to one knee. Lyra quickly adjusted a joint, but instead of just fixing it, she watched how Alpha 7 tried again. This time, it rotated its shoulders slightly before reaching out. The climb succeeded. "See?" Lyra whispered softly, almost to herself. "You're not broken. You're learning." No one else in the room understood. The soldiers snickered. "It's just luck," one muttered. "Machines can't learn like that. They just happen to work sometimes." Lyra shook her head, standing up. She knew that these flaws were exactly what made the robots different. They had potential that the AI fleets of the Andari Confederation could never touch because humans had built-in unpredictability. The robots had room to grow, to think creatively, to act in ways no algorithm could predict. Still, watching the galaxy's reaction was painful. She walked through the rows of towering robots, patting their metal shoulders as she passed. "Don't mind them," she whispered. "They just don't understand yet." One day, while running diagnostics in the central workshop, Lyra noticed something strange in the programming logs. Tiny deviations in the robots' routines were not errors. They were intentional. Somehow, the robots were modifying their own code. Every failed movement, every misstep, seemed to create a new pattern. Lyra's heart raced. This was unlike any machine she had ever seen. She spent hours studying the logs, scribbling notes on her clipboard, her mind buzzing with ideas. Could it be that these robots were evolving on their own? Not fully conscious, not alive in the human sense, but learning in a human-like way? If so, their clumsiness was not a weakness, it was a sign of hidden strength. Lyra's fascination grew even as the public mockery continued. News reports highlighted the robots' mistakes, edited videos made them look foolish, and even Terran officials joked nervously about the metal circus. But Lyra ignored it all. She spent long nights in the workshop, running simulations, testing movements, and observing the robot's learning patterns. She began to see patterns where others saw chaos. Alpha 7, Beta 1, 2, and Gamma 9 names given casually by the engineers were developing unique strategies for problem solving. When presented with a challenge, no two robots approached it the same way. One would attempt brute force, another would look for leverage, and a third would combine both approaches. Lyra realized that the imperfections that everyone laughed at were actually their greatest strength: adaptability. It was during one late-night session that Lyra had her first real breakthrough. She placed a complex obstacle course in front of the robots, one that no AI program could solve without hundreds of iterations. The robots hesitated, clanging against walls, falling, and rising again. Lyra sat back and watched as something incredible happened. Alpha 7 climbed a wall in a completely new way. Beta 1-2 used its arm like a lever to swing over a gap. Gamma 9 coordinated with the others to push a heavy barrier aside. They were communicating silently, adapting, solving problems together. "Unbelievable," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. "They're thinking." It wasn't conscious thought like humans had, but it was close. The robots were improvising, combining trial and error with what they had learned from one another. Every stumble was a lesson. Every failure created a new strategy. The next morning, Lyra faced the ridicule again. Officers, engineers, and journalists crowded the field, cameras flashing as the robots stumbled across drills. One reporter laughed loudly. "These are the best Terran defenses? They're like children playing with tin cans." Lyra's stomach tightened, but she refused to argue. Instead, she observed quietly. Inside, she felt a spark of confidence. She knew the galaxy had not yet seen what the robots were capable of. She knew that beneath the laughter and scorn, the Terran robots were preparing themselves for something no one could imagine. The day passed, and the ridicule only grew. Lyra returned to the workshop, her mind racing. She began drawing detailed schematics of the robots, noting every anomaly, every deviation, every small mistake that led to a new solution. She realized that the key to their success might lie in understanding these patterns. She could teach them to harness their unpredictability instead of fighting it. By evening, the workshop was quiet. The robots stood in orderly rows, waiting for instructions or perhaps just for her guidance. Lyra walked among them, touching the cold metal of their frames. She whispered to them like an old friend, "We're going to show them, you and I. They don't understand yet, but they will." Outside, the galaxy laughed. Terran officials fretted. Andari fleets continued their mocking broadcasts. But inside the walls of the workshop, Lyra felt a quiet thrill. Something extraordinary was growing, something no one else could see. The robot army that everyone laughed at was not weak, it was learning, evolving, and waiting for the day it would prove its worth. As night fell over the Terran colonies, Lyra looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Andari fleets were preparing for war. Confident in their superiority, they did not know that a human mechanic had already begun unlocking a power that no AI could predict. Lyra smiled faintly, wiping her hands on her overalls. "Soon," she whispered. "They'll see. Soon, they'll understand." And with that, she returned to the workshop, her mind alive with possibilities. For the first time, she truly believed that the so-called mocked Legion was not a failure, but a new kind of hope for humanity. The Terran colonies still laughed at the robot army, but Lyra Vance no longer paid attention to the ridicule. She spent every waking hour in the central workshop, studying the machines, running experiments, and testing their limits. To the rest of the world, the robots were slow, clumsy, and obsolete. But Lyra knew the truth. They were more than machines. They were learners, adapters, and problem solvers. And if she could understand them fully, she might uncover a power the galaxy had never seen. It started with a small discovery. While checking the internal logs of Gamma 9, one of the smaller, lighter robots, Lyra noticed tiny changes in its code. The robot had slightly altered the way it calculated balance when climbing obstacles. At first, she thought it was a programming error. But then she saw similar adjustments in Beta 1, 2, and Alpha 7. They were not errors. They were deliberate. Lyra leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. She realized that the robots were modifying their own routines, learning from each failure and adapting for the next attempt. Unlike AI fleets of the Andari Confederation, which followed strict programming, these robots were evolving. They were experimenting with solutions. They were thinking in their own mechanical way. The concept excited Lyra. It explained everything: their clumsiness, their random-seeming failures, and their unusual problem-solving methods. What the world called weakness was actually a sign of potential. If she could help them refine this natural learning ability, they could surpass any AI army in the galaxy. Lyra began running structured tests. She created obstacle courses, puzzles, and drills that no robot had ever faced. The machines stumbled, fell, and sometimes failed completely, but then they adjusted. A heavy wall blocked the path. Gamma 9 found a way to push it. A gap too wide to jump. Alpha 7 rotated its arm to use as a lever and swung across. The robots began to surprise even Lyra with their creativity. It was not just the actions themselves that were remarkable, it was the patterns. Each robot approached problems differently. One would try brute force, another would seek a clever mechanical advantage, and another would combine both methods. Sometimes, they worked together, coordinating movements in ways Lyra had never programmed. She realized that their learning extended beyond themselves. They could cooperate in ways that resembled human teamwork. "Look at you all," she whispered one night as she walked through the workshop, hands resting on metal shoulders. "You're smarter than anyone thinks. You're not just following orders. You're thinking." She could feel a change in the robots. They seemed to respond to her presence, as if they understood that she believed in them. When she entered the workshop, their heads tilted slightly, their movements smoother, not because she commanded them, but because they trusted her guidance. Lyra realized that her human intuition was becoming part of their system. She was not just a mechanic, she was a mentor. As days turned into weeks, Lyra noticed another strange phenomenon. Some robots began trying approaches she had never taught them. They combined movements she had demonstrated with patterns they had discovered themselves. A robot that failed repeatedly on a balance beam suddenly found a new way to cross it. One that Lyra had never considered. It was learning from failure, but also from observation. This discovery thrilled her. The robot's evolution was not random, it was intelligent. They were capable of innovation, and if she could harness this, the Terran colonies might have a fighting force unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Lyra knew she could not reveal this to the public. The mockery would only grow, and officials would shut down her experiments. Instead, she kept a private log, writing detailed notes about every robot, every anomaly, and every new behavior. She studied patterns, ran simulations, and even built new parts to encourage further adaptation. She was creating a system where human creativity and robotic learning merged seamlessly. One evening, as Lyra sat at her workstation reviewing the day's results, Alpha 7 approached her slowly. Its metal hands rested on the edge of the table, and it seemed to watch her work. Lyra smiled. She spoke softly. "I see what you did today. That move at the obstacle course you improvised. You didn't wait for instructions. That's brilliant." The robot remained silent, as usual. But its movements seemed sharper, more deliberate. Lyra could feel it somehow. They understood her praise. They were responding not just to commands but to human insight. The line between machine and human thought was beginning to blur. Then came the challenge Lyra had been waiting for. She built a complex simulation that mimicked an actual battle scenario. Obstacles, moving targets, and unpredictable variables were included. She deployed Alpha 7, Beta 1-2, and Gamma 9, watching closely. The first attempts were chaotic. The robots stumbled, miscalculated, and occasionally collided. But they never gave up. They adapted quickly, changing strategies mid-course. Lyra's heart pounded. She realized she had created something extraordinary. Machines that could not only learn but also innovate under pressure. Unlike AI fleets, which followed pre-programmed tactics, these robots could think on their feet. They could adjust to unexpected circumstances. They could do what no algorithm could. "Tomorrow, I'll test them together," she muttered, excitement in her voice. "We'll see how far they can go as a team." The next day, she arranged a series of coordinated challenges, designed to test both individual skill and teamwork. At first, the robots acted independently, their movements slightly disorganized, but then, something amazing happened. Beta 1-2 pushed a barrier just as Gamma 9 attempted to climb over it. Alpha 7 timed its move to take advantage of the opening. They were communicating silently, adjusting strategies, and learning from one another. Lyra watched in awe. This was not programmed behavior, it was emergent intelligence. The robots were evolving as a group, creating strategies she had never seen, and each success seemed to reinforce their learning, making the next move even better. As the weeks passed, Lyra began sharing small successes with a few trusted colleagues. They were skeptical at first. "It's just coincidence," one said. "Machines can't think like that." But when she demonstrated coordinated tasks, complex problem-solving, and adaptive learning, even the skeptics were amazed. The robots were no longer simple tools, they were partners, capable of creativity and strategy. Word began to spread quietly. Some engineers whispered about the robots' strange behavior. Some soldiers watched with new respect. But Lyra knew that the galaxy at large would not believe it until the robots proved themselves in the most extreme test imaginable: real combat. And that day was approaching faster than anyone realized. The Andari Confederation had long been observing the Terran colonies, noting their weaknesses and mocking their clumsy defenses. A large fleet was gathering at the edge of Terran space, preparing to strike. Lyra knew the robots' true potential would soon be tested, but she was not afraid. In fact, she felt a surge of confidence. She had spent months unlocking the hidden complexity of the robot army. She had nurtured their learning, encouraged their innovation, and guided their evolution. And now, for the first time, she believed they were ready. She walked among the robots, her fingers brushing cold metal and smooth wires. "You're ready," she whispered. "The world doesn't see it yet, but you're ready to show them." Alpha 7 tilted its head, Beta 1-2 shifted slightly, and Gamma 9's arm extended toward her, almost as if in acknowledgement. Lyra smiled. It was not a conscious gesture, but she felt the connection. She had created more than a machine army. She had created a force that could think, adapt, and overcome. And it had her guidance, her intuition, and her creativity woven into its circuits. The galaxy might laugh. The officials might doubt. The Andari fleets might underestimate them. But Lyra knew the truth. These robots were not ordinary machines. They were evolving intelligence, capable of improvisation and teamwork. And driven by human ingenuity, she returned to her workbench, sketching new designs, writing new code, and planning enhancements. Every day, every test, and every small improvement brought them closer to their full potential. And she felt a deep sense of excitement. Soon, the galaxy would see what she had known all along. The robot army that everyone mocked was no longer just a clumsy force. It was a hidden power, quietly growing, learning, and preparing. And when the time came, it would show the universe that human insight and creativity could turn even the most underestimated tools into something extraordinary. As night fell over the Terran colonies, Lyra stood at the workshop window, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Andari fleets were preparing, confident in their superiority. They did not know that humans had already begun unlocking a force that could outthink any AI. Lyra whispered to the silent machines behind her. "Soon, they'll see. They'll understand what we are capable of." And for the first time, she felt certain that the mocked legion, the robot army everyone had laughed at, was on the verge of proving itself. Not because of raw power, not because of advanced programming, but because of the hidden complexity that only a human mind could recognize and nurture. The stars had never looked so calm. And yet Lyra Vance felt a tension in the air that she could not ignore. For months, she had been preparing the robots, nurturing their hidden abilities, and teaching them to adapt. But now, the galaxy itself seemed to be moving closer to war. Reports from the Terran colony's reconnaissance units were alarming. The Undari Confederation had amassed a massive fleet at the outer edge of Terran space. Their ships were faster, more precise, and fully automated with advanced AI weaponry. The officials in Terran command were panicked. Military strategists debated endlessly. But all of them reached the same conclusion. Terran conventional forces were no match for the Undari AI fleet. Human soldiers could fight bravely, but without superior technology or advanced AI, defeat was almost certain. And yet, Lyra did not feel fear. She had been preparing for this moment in silence. The robot army, mocked by the galaxy, was ready to face the greatest challenge any Terran force had ever seen. The first report came early one morning. Sensors detected a small strike team of Undari drones heading toward one of the outer colonies. The Terran fleet scrambled, but their response was slow. Panic rippled through the communications channels. Lyra, already in the central workshop, knew that waiting for conventional reinforcements would be a mistake. The robots needed to be deployed immediately. She activated the command sequence she had designed in secret. The robots whirred to life, their movements precise but still displaying that strange adaptability she had cultivated. Alpha 7, Beta 1-2, and Gamma 9 led the Legion, moving swiftly across the terrain toward the outer colony. The first encounter was chaotic. The Undari drones, sleek and perfectly coordinated, opened fire with deadly accuracy. Conventional Terran defenses struggled to respond. But the robots did not panic. Alpha 7 ducked behind a ruined wall, calculated the trajectory of incoming fire, and rolled to a safe position. Beta 1-2 used debris as cover, then hurled a heavy metal crate at a drone, knocking it off balance. Gamma 9 coordinated with others, creating a makeshift barrier to shield civilians. Lyra watched the live feed from the command center, her heart pounding. The robots' movements were not just reactive, they were adaptive. Each time an Undari drone adjusted its attack, the robots countered in real time, improvising new strategies. They were thinking in ways no AI could predict. Soldiers watching alongside Lyra were stunned. How? How are they doing that? One muttered. They should be overwhelmed. Lyra smiled quietly. She knew the secret. It was human intuition embedded in the machines. She had guided their learning, nurtured their mistakes, and now, that guidance allowed them to innovate under pressure. The Undari drones, programmed to expect predictable responses, were confused. Their algorithms could not anticipate the robots' improvisations. One drone attempted a rapid strike, only to collide with a moving barrier created by the robots. Another tried to flank, but Alpha 7 had already adapted, intercepting it before it could cause harm. Meanwhile, Lyra issued silent commands through the robot's adaptive interface, subtle adjustments that the machines incorporated seamlessly. It was not direct control, she was not telling them exactly what to do but guiding their learning in real time. Each success built confidence, and the robots moved with an almost human intuition. By the time the battle ended, the Undari strike team had been neutralized. The Terran soldiers cheered in disbelief. The robot army, once mocked and ridiculed, had held the line against the advanced AI drones, but Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The main fleet was far larger, faster, and more dangerous. She returned to the workshop with the robots, running diagnostics and minor repairs. Every mechanical joint, every servo, every circuit was checked and strengthened. The robots had performed admirably, but they were about to face a challenge unlike anything they had encountered before. The night before the main engagement, Lyra walked among them. The metallic bodies gleamed under the workshop lights, but there was something almost alive in the way they moved. She crouched in front of Alpha 7, speaking softly. "Tomorrow will be the real test," she said. "The galaxy expects us to fail. But I know what you can do. I know how strong you are. Trust yourselves. Trust what you've learned." Alpha 7 tilted its head, almost as if acknowledging her words. Beta 1-2 adjusted its stance. Gamma 9 extended an arm toward her, And though it was not conscious understanding, Lyra felt a connection that went beyond programming. She had nurtured their adaptability, their creativity, and their instinct for survival. Now, it was time for the world to see it. Dawn broke with a crimson sky over the outer colonies. The Andari fleet appeared like a storm on the horizon, hundreds of sleek ships glinting in the sunlight. Terran defenses braced, but everyone knew it was unlikely they could hold them off with conventional forces. Lyra stood in the command center, watching as the robots were deployed in formation. They moved with a precision that was almost artful, but always with an element of unpredictability. Lyra's enhancements allowed them to react, adapt, and improvise in real time. The first wave of Andari ships opened fire, and the battle began. Lasers streaked across the sky, explosions lit the clouds, and chaos reigned on the battlefield. Conventional Terran ships faltered under the overwhelming firepower, but the robots moved with an agility that stunned both humans and AI alike. Alpha 7 led a coordinated strike, weaving between laser blasts and using debris as shields. Beta 1-2 disabled a drone carrier by calculating the precise trajectory of falling debris, a solution that no AI would have attempted. Gamma 9 worked in tandem, creating diversions and traps that funneled enemy ships into vulnerable positions. The Andari commanders were baffled. Their AI systems could not anticipate the robots' unconventional tactics. Every time they tried to execute a standard attack pattern, the robots adapted, improvising new strategies on the fly. They were thinking creatively, learning from failure, and coordinating in ways no AI could predict. Terran soldiers watched in awe. "It's like they can see the future," one whispered. "They know what the Andari will do next." Lyra smiled faintly. They were not seeing the future, they were seeing human intuition embedded in metal and circuits. Every success was a product of her guidance, every adaptation a reflection of the lessons she had taught them. Hours passed, and the battle raged on. The robots were relentless, combining brute force, strategy, and adaptability. They used terrain to their advantage, created impromptu shields, and even coordinated attacks that seemed almost intelligent. The Andari fleet, for all its precision and advanced AI, began to falter. Lyra's heart raced as she watched. The robots she had once tinkered with, the ones the galaxy had mocked, were now rewriting the rules of warfare. They were not just fighting, they were evolving mid-battle, learning from every attack and improving with each move. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the tide of battle turned. The Andari fleet, overconfident and confused by the robots' unpredictability, began to retreat. Terran soldiers cheered, and Lyra allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. The battlefield was littered with debris, damaged drones, and exhausted robots, but they had done it. The mocked Legion had held against the most advanced AI the galaxy had ever produced. Lyra walked among them, checking circuits and joints, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You did it," she said softly. "You proved them wrong. Not because of raw power, but because of your creativity, your adaptability, and your willingness to learn. That's what makes you extraordinary." Alpha 7, Beta 1-2, and Gamma 9 moved closer, as if acknowledging her praise. Lyra smiled. She had done more than repair machines, she had nurtured something remarkable. The robot army was no longer just a tool. It was a living testament to human ingenuity, adaptability, and guidance. News of the battle spread quickly across the colonies. Terran officials, who had once mocked the robots, now hailed them as heroes. The galaxy began to take notice. What had seemed like a clumsy, outdated army had revealed a hidden power, the ability to learn, adapt, and innovate in ways that no AI could match. Lyra, however, knew this was only the beginning. The Andari fleet would return, larger and more determined than ever. But she also knew that the robots had evolved, and so had she. Together, they were no longer just defending the Terran colonies, they were redefining the future of warfare, proving that human insight and creativity could overcome even the most advanced machines. As night fell over the battlefield, Lyra stood among the robots, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the Andari fleet was regrouping, confident in its superiority. But the Terran robots, guided by human intuition, were ready. They had learned, adapted, and evolved, and when the next battle came, they would show the galaxy that underestimating the human mind and those who could harness it was a mistake no one could afford. Lyra whispered to the machines one last time that night. "Tomorrow, we fight again. But now, they'll understand. Now, they'll see what humans and our creations can do together." And with that, she returned to the workshop, her mind already racing with plans for the next stage of their evolution. The unexpected threat had proven one thing. The robot army everyone had laughed at was no longer to be underestimated. The galaxy was watching. After the initial skirmish at the outer colonies, rumors of the Terran robot army had spread like wildfire. No one could believe that the once laughed-at machines had held their ground against the Andari AI fleet. Analysts, military leaders, and civilians alike were all curious, skeptical, and in some cases, fearful. Yet for Lyra Vance, the human mechanic who had guided and nurtured these robots, this attention mattered little. She was focused on preparation, refinement, and strategy. The real test, the ultimate challenge, was still ahead. The Andari Confederation, furious at their previous defeat, had returned. This time, their fleet was larger, faster, and equipped with new AI enhancements. Reports indicated thousands of drones, automated warships, and energy weapons capable of destroying an entire city in seconds. Terran command was on edge. Conventional forces were no longer enough to defend their colonies. Every human soldier knew the stakes were higher than ever. Lyra, however, had a plan. The robots were ready. Not just Alpha 7, Beta 1-2, and Gamma 9, the entire army she had secretly trained for months had evolved in ways no AI could predict. Each machine was adaptive, improvisational, and guided by the human intuition Lyra had instilled. They had learned to cooperate, anticipate threats, and create strategies without direct orders. In the central command center, Lyra stood before the live feed of the Andari fleet. Ships blazed across space, their precision terrifying, yet somehow predictable. The humans had learned to rely on patterns, rigid patterns. The Terran robots, however, had learned to break them. "Everyone ready?" Lyra asked softly. Her team of engineers nodded, tense but confident. The robots stood in formation, their metal bodies gleaming under the light of the command center. They were no longer machines to be mocked. They were allies, partners, and symbols of Terran ingenuity. The first wave of the Andari fleet arrived faster than expected, launching a barrage of laser attacks and missile strikes. Terran forces scrambled, but Lyra knew it was the robots' moment to shine. She activated the adaptive protocol she had designed, a system allowing the robots to analyze the battlefield in real time and adjust their strategies on the fly. Immediately, the robots dispersed. They moved unpredictably, weaving between incoming fire, taking advantage of the terrain, and using debris as shields. Alpha 7 led a squad that executed a flanking maneuver, intercepting a group of drones before they could reach the human defenses. Beta 1-2 coordinated with smaller units, creating diversions and traps that confused enemy AI. Gamma 9, along with others, disabled weapon systems with calculated precision, striking where the Andari least expected. For the first time, Lyra realized the full potential of her work. The robots were not just fighting, they were thinking. Each adaptation, each maneuver, was unique. They were learning from one another, refining their tactics in real time, and improvising solutions to problems Lyra herself had never imagined. The battle intensified. The Andari fleet launched wave after wave, but the Terran robots held their ground. Conventional weapons faltered against the overwhelming enemy numbers, but the robots' creativity, adaptability, and coordination allowed them to survive and thrive. At one point, an Andari warship attempted to bypass the Terran defenses entirely. Alpha 7 detected it immediately. Without waiting for orders, it calculated the optimal trajectory, timed a series of maneuvers, and led a squad to intercept. The warship was disabled before it could inflict any damage. Beta 1, 2, and Gamma 9 coordinated secondary attacks, ensuring that no enemy could escape. Human soldiers watched in awe. They had doubted the robots, laughed at them, and even feared they would fail. Now, they cheered for them. The mocked Legion had become the strongest force in the galaxy not because of size or raw power, but because of human-guided intelligence embedded in every machine. Lyra's mind raced as she monitored the battlefield. She noticed patterns forming in the Andari AI, predictable responses, repeated maneuvers, and attempts to exploit perceived weaknesses. But the robots were always one step ahead. Alpha 7 would adjust its approach. Beta 1, 2 would counter the AI's calculations, and Gamma 9 would manipulate the terrain to create advantages. "This is incredible," one of the engineers whispered. "They're thinking strategically, but it's like human creativity mixed with machine precision." Lyra nodded, a small smile on her face. "Exactly. That's what makes them unstoppable." Hours passed, and the Andari fleet began to falter. Their superior numbers and advanced technology could not match the improvisation and adaptability of the human-guided robots. Each failed assault taught the robots new lessons. Each mistake by the enemy created new opportunities. Lyra realized that the battle was not just about defeating the Andari fleet. It was about teaching the galaxy a truth that humans had always known. Creativity, intuition, and adaptability could never be replicated by AI alone. By nightfall, the battlefield was littered with debris, destroyed drones, and exhausted robots. Yet the Terran forces had emerged victorious. The Andari fleet, unable to anticipate or adapt to the robots' unconventional tactics, retreated in defeat. Terran soldiers cheered, engineers hugged each other, and across the colonies, news feeds began to celebrate an unexpected victory. Lyra walked among the robots, checking their systems and offering quiet words of praise. "You did it," she said softly. "You've proven them wrong. You've shown the galaxy what we are capable of." Alpha 7, Beta 1, 2, and Gamma 9 moved in unison, responding to her presence. They had become more than machines. They were allies, partners, and symbols of human ingenuity. Lyra felt a sense of pride deeper than anything she had ever known. She had taken something laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated and transformed it into a force the galaxy could not ignore. In the days that followed, Terran Command formally recognized the robots' contributions. The once-mocked army became the pride of the colonies. Scientists and engineers began studying the adaptive protocols Lyra had developed, understanding how human-guided learning could revolutionize not just warfare, but technology in general. The galaxy began to change its view of humanity. Other civilizations, once dismissive, now watched with respect and in some cases, fear. The Terran colonies had demonstrated that even when outnumbered and outmatched technologically, human creativity and insight could turn the tide. Lyra, however, remained humble. She knew that the robots had succeeded not just because of her guidance, but because of the unique combination of human intuition and machine adaptability. She continued to work with them, refining systems, improving learning protocols, and preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as she walked through the workshop, she paused to look at the robots, standing silently in formation. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "The galaxy will never underestimate us again." The stars above seemed brighter, the future of the Terran colonies clearer. Lyra knew that the robot army was not just a tool for defense, it was a testament to the power of human ingenuity, creativity, and determination. They had taken a mocked, underestimated force and transformed it into a symbol of hope and strength. And somewhere out there, the Andari fleets and every other civilization that had doubted humanity would remember this victory. They would remember that while AI could calculate, predict, and attack, it could never replicate the spark of human creativity. Lyra walked among the robots one last time that night, her hands brushing cold metal and smooth circuits. "You are extraordinary," she said softly. "Not because of your strength, not because of your speed but because you have learned, adapted, and evolved. And together, we have proven the galaxy wrong. Alpha 7, Beta 1-2, and Gamma 9 moved slightly closer, responding to her words with the subtle movements she had come to recognize as acknowledgement. Lyra smiled. She had nurtured more than machines. She had nurtured a partnership that would define the future of the Terran colonies. The galaxy had laughed at the robot army. But now, the laughter was gone, replaced by awe, respect, and a deep understanding of human ingenuity. Lyra knew that the journey was far from over. New challenges would arise, new threats would appear, and the robots would continue to evolve. Yet for the first time, the Terran colonies could stand tall. They had proven that even in a galaxy dominated by AI and advanced technology, the creativity, adaptability, and insight of humans could not be ignored. And as long as humans guided machines, as long as they nurtured innovation and learning, no force in the universe could match their potential. Lyra Vance stood in the workshop, watching the robots move silently in the dim light. "We did it," she whispered. "We've shown them what humanity is truly capable of. And this is only the beginning." The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging the triumph of human creativity and the power of imagination, adaptability, and courage. The Terran colonies had discovered a force that no one could predict, and the galaxy would never forget it. The robot army, once mocked, had become a living testament to the genius of humanity. And Lyra Vance, the quiet mechanic who had believed when no one else did, had unlocked a future where humans and machines together could accomplish the impossible. The galaxy had finally learned a truth that Terrans had always known: underestimate humanity, and you risk being outsmarted in ways you could never imagine. And with that, a new era began. One where the spark of human creativity burned brighter than any AI algorithm, lighting the path to a future full of possibilities, hope, and triumph.